Getting some morning sunshine. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. My name is Glenna. If you're new here, welcome. I knew he'd be a problem. Hi, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to talk a little bit about books, which I'm really excited about. This is not really like a book vlog, book talk kind of channel, but I do read a lot and I love books, and I wanted to just kind of share the books that I read in 2023 and then a really sweet present that my friend got me, and today is February 1st, so I get to open it. But before I get into that, I just want to say hi and good morning, and I hope you enjoyed my little like morning routine. I just made my coffee. I'm not sure if I'm gonna finish it because I'm already feeling pretty energized and I'm trying to like stop drinking as much caffeine. I keep a bullet journal, and I keep a not like a one bullet journal per year kind of girl. I'm like this bullet journal starts in 2021. So you can see the books that I read in 2021, 2022, 2023, what I'm currently working on 2024. Last year, I read the whole Bible, and I actually ended up reading 30 books. My goal was 23 books in 2023. I read The Stand-In. I loved this book. It was so good. It was such a good read. It was romantic without being like smutty. It always like ended. It was a closed door romance, I think is what it's called. So it would get like almost into the spicy bit and then it would be like done, which is how I prefer to read. I don't really want to like get into too much detail when I'm reading romance books. I'd rather it be closed door, but I really liked it. The protagonist is very type A, very organized. She's great. I love her. I identified with her a lot, and then it also has a lot of really great like Asian American concepts in it and like opened my eyes to a lot of things, so I really liked that. The second book I read last year was Night by Elie Wiesel. I had to read this book in an hour. Like I sat down and I opened it and I read as quickly as I could because I really wanted to read it. My brother-in-law, he read it and actually wrote letters to Elie Wiesel and he responded to them. But also Andrew really liked the book when he read it, so I was like, okay, I really want to read this book. I will have to say that I did cry. I had to read it super fast so that I wouldn't be lingering on the like trauma of it, but oh my goodness, that's a tough read. The third book I read this last year was a reread for me. It was Girl Boss by Sophia Amoruso. I really do like that book. It's just definitely one that has like it's definitely one that has a lot of good information, but a lot of redundant information if you read any other self-help books or like business themed books. So anyways, I read that. Fourth book I read this year was Simply Jesus. Now this book is definitely like an intro to Jesus. I thought that reading it that I would be reading like something that would help me as a Christian explain Jesus better, but basically it was like if you've never been to church, if you've never heard of Jesus, if you're just trying to like test out religion or trying to test out a relationship with God, you'd read this book and it's kind of like the very basic intro. So I rated it a 1 star. I would never read it again because it's just not, it doesn't equate where I'm at in my walk with the Lord to make that like worth reading again, if that makes sense. The next book was The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Now I actually really liked The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. I prefer The Adventures of Tom Sawyer to Huckleberry Finn, which was the next book that I read. I actually did these in audiobooks, and I kind of wanted to do a little chat about audiobooks because I feel like audiobooks have like this weird like almost controversy around them. Actually my niece, like she's very anti-audiobook, or she thinks that like if you listen to an audiobook you're not actually reading a book, and I like wholeheartedly disagree because most of my books that I read, which I always tell you like that they are but a lot of the books that I read during the year are audiobooks because I'm an auditory learner and I take in a lot of information if I listen to it. So I actually listened to both The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and I have to say I much prefer The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Like, definitely read that before you read Huckleberry Finn, but I much prefer The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. The next book I read was On the Road by Jack Kerouac, and this one I would say is definitely like classic. Like, I think that it's one that I read because it's on Rory Gilmore's reading list. It's referenced in like the first season and a lot in the first season, but it's definitely one that I would say that I wouldn't read again, but I think that it would be really fun to read like on a road trip or read like with your class, I guess. The next book I read was a book in French called Tristan and Isolde, and I really liked this book. I think that I need to reread it because there was a couple things that I didn't quite get, but it's basically like a love story about these two people, and it's French, so it's really tragic, but it was pretty good. The next book I read was Just Haven't Met You Yet by Sophia Cousins. She's pretty popular, and I know that like a lot of her books do really well, but I didn't like this book that much. Like, it was a quick read. It's a rom-com, like booktok kind of book. It was super fast, but it just like, it didn't give me what I wanted it to give me. I guess I kind of like expected it. I had higher expectations and it didn't quite deliver on my expectations. But I do think that it's a great book if you are like going on vacation. But honestly, I would only do that if you had a Kindle, because you're only gonna read it for like, it took me a day and a half to read. And honestly, like if you have a Kindle, it's a perfect like put on your Kindle and go out of town with. But it's not like a book that I would say you should buy a physical copy of. The next book I read was actually a book that was part of a book exchange that I did around Christmas time last year, and I got it for that, and it was All Quiet on the Western Front. Now this book was really good. It was very eye-opening. I always knew that war was happening. I know that war is a thing, but I did not feel it as real as I felt it when I was reading about his fear in the trenches. I don't know, just the camaraderie. Like, I feel like it actually really opened my eyes to war. It's definitely a book that I will have like my kids read when I homeschool them for like history class when we learn about World War II. Like, it's definitely a book that I'd have them read because it was just really eye-opening. Like, I didn't realize how real war was until I read it, which maybe it sounds dense. The next book I read was Madame Bovary, and I liked Madame Bovary. I think it was funny. I love the plot twist at the end. I would definitely read it again. I listened to the audiobook of I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. Now this is a book that I would say you have to do audiobook because she reads it herself, and it's just, there's something about listening to somebody tell their own story. Like, it sounds like it's more like listening to a podcast or listening to like a FaceTime with a friend, but it was really good. It was deep and it was triggering, and if you've experienced any like childhood abuse or parental abuse, like, I would take that fair warning before you open it up. But it was really good. I'm not gonna read it again. It's definitely not like a reread, but it was like oh, I read that once and now I know a little bit more about, you know, the Nickelodeon scandals and like all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, I liked it. I think it was a good book. I think it's definitely an audiobook. Do not read it yourself. The next book I read was Taylor Jenkins Reid's Daisy Jones and the Six, and I actually read it out loud to my husband, and we loved that book. Like, I would definitely read that again, probably like in a couple of years. I actually watched the series on Amazon Prime and it was really good. I actually really liked the way that they did it because they changed it for the screen. They changed it in such like dynamic and beautiful ways. Like, I really enjoyed it, but I really enjoyed reading it. I actually want to read this year The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. That's on my list, and Malibu Rising is on my list. I really like the way that Taylor Jenkins Reid writes. I think it's very easy to read, and also like she writes really dynamic characters, and I enjoy it a lot. The next book I read was my sister's memoir, which I'm not going to share about because she's in the process of publishing it, but it was amazing, and as soon as it's out, I'm going to be talking about it nonstop because wow, it was a really good book. Then I read Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. I actually listened to that one as an audiobook, and I liked it. But I'm not a big Dickens fan. Like, I have a couple more things that I'm gonna read this year that are Dickens, but I don't know, I'm not a fan of that, like, that era of literature. It's really hard for me to understand. The next book I read was a reread. I read it probably once every like 3 years. The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. I cry when I read The Outsiders. I love that book so much. It is one of my favorite books. It was like kind of, I read it for the first time in school in 8th grade for honors English, and I love it so much. Like I reread it once every about every 3 years. The next book I read is also a reread, and I read this trilogy every year, and I read it every year since I was in 7th grade, and I hate the adaptation of it on Amazon Prime, but it's The Summer I Turned Pretty, It's Not Summer Without You, and We'll Always Have Summer. And I love these books so much, but like Lola's great, but she's not my belly. Like I just love these books so much, and I've loved them for such a long time. They're so good. The story is so good. So here's the thing though. As an adult, if I picked it up, I would be like, that's cringy, that's annoying, this girl's crazy, I don't like it. I would not read it. But because I read it when I was so young and I related to her when I was boy crazy and a child, then I'm like, I don't know, it's kind of nostalgic for me. I think that's why I read it every summer. I'm like introing the summer with it. But I can read those books in like one sitting. I just sit down and I open it and I'm done in like 2 minutes because I memorized like most of the book. I like the Amazon Prime TV show of it, but as a separate entity. Like that is not the same storyline to me. Who she ends up with in the book, I love, and I love it for her. I want her to end up with the other one in the show. If you've read it, you know. But it's just the way they're portraying him is just not right. The next book I read after that trilogy was A History of the World in 6 Classes, and oh my gosh, that was a really informative book. I feel like that's the kind of book that you want like to set on your dining table or something and you read with your family and like have something to talk about. Like I think it's just a lot of information and it's really good to read, and I liked it a lot. The next book I read was a reread for me, and I read it for the first time when I was in 5th grade, and I really liked it, and I wanted to reread it because there was some of the history that I didn't remember, and it's Taking Off. This book is about Krista McAuliffe, who was the person that went up, the teacher that went up in the Challenger when it exploded. It's a really cute story, and it's really inspiring, and it's great like young adult fiction. Like it's the perfect like coming of age, read it, get inspired, figure out what you want to do with your life kind of book. The next book I read was La Petite France, and I read it in French, and it was a reread for me too, but I wanted like an easy French read. I try to read French books to like keep up with my language and my vocabulary and my knowledge of French. The next book I read was The Ex-Hex, and honestly, I'm not gonna read it again. It was a little too witchy for me. I feel very sensitive like in my spirit to things that are definitely not of God. I didn't know that they were gonna talk so much about spells in it. I don't suggest it. I also don't think it was as well written as it could have been. Like it was kind of disappointing, like not only with the spiritually like just uncomfortable about it, but it just wasn't written very well. It was like when they introduced a character, it was like all of a sudden that character's in there. They didn't give you a ton of backstory, and they kind of like jumped from one topic to the next. And at the end of the book, which I'm not going to give away, like I'm not going to spoil anything, but at the end of the book, the storyline builds up and then it stops and then it picks up years later and doesn't like talk about that in between time. I don't know, it just didn't give, it wasn't giving what I wanted it to give. It just wasn't it for me. The next book I read was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This was also a reread for me. I love Frankenstein. I think it is the saddest, like it's a tragedy. It's just a very cozy like fall read for me. The next book I read was Metamorphosis by Kafka, and that one I did not understand, and I will definitely have to reread. There was a couple parts in it that I was like, wait, who is talking? Like what is happening? Who are you talking to? Why are you watching your sister? Like it was just kind of weird. I read Walden by Henry David Thoreau. That one I actually really liked. It had a lot of very interesting like existential crisis kind of comments in it that I thought were really interesting to ponder. The next book I read was The Joylet Club. I loved that book. I listened to it. I did an audiobook of The Joylet Club on Libby, and it was really good. Like the person that was reading it was really good reader, but I liked that book a lot, and I actually want to buy it and reread it probably in the next like 3 years. It was really well written. It was dynamic. The next book I read was The Lost Apothecary, and I loved this book too, by Sarah Penner. It was a good book. I think that an audiobook of it would be kind of fun because they would be like different voices, because every chapter or almost every chapter is written from the perspective of a different woman, but the plot twists, the the surprises. That book is so good. The next book I read was To Kill a Mockingbird, and this is a reread for me. I read To Kill a Mockingbird every year. It is my favorite book. It is a book that is really close to my heart and a book that I resonate with a lot. My parents are both in the law, and so I don't know, the way that she talks about it and the way that Scout feels in the courtroom and stuff like that, I don't know, it just means a lot to me. I love that book. It's one of my favorites. And then the last book I read and I finish every year, and this is also a reread for me, is the Bible. I read the Bible every year. This year I read it twice. I read it cover to cover, and I read it chronologically. Those are the books I read in 2023. So for Christmas this year, my friend Sarah got me basically like an advent calendar of books for the entire year. She got me 12 books, and that's just amazing. So the first book she got me was this one, The Unfair Advantage by Aaron Burke. Now, Ange and I are reading this together, so it's actually taken me the entire month. We're planning to finish it tonight, which is really bad. It's never taken me that long to read a book, but we're reading it together, so we have to read it out loud, and we're slower when we read out loud, and then also we have to read it when it's convenient for both of us, so that's part of it. I like this book. So basically what he does is he parallels our lives and the things that happen in our lives to Joseph in the Bible, in Genesis. He has a lot of one-liners that are really good. It's given me a lot to think about, of like my dreams and my goals, and setting big goals because I serve a big God. But he also has a lot of not biblically accurate things that he says in here. I don't know the best way to describe it, but basically like a lot of extra information, like little sprinkles of information that aren't like, oh, theologians believe blah blah blah, but it's not, you're like, but that's not biblically accurate. And there's been like 4 times that I can remember off the top of my head that he's done that in this book. So that's like a take it with a grain of salt, but he does have some really good one-liners, and we're almost done with the book. We have like 20 pages left. So this is my book for February, which I'm super excited about opening. Meet Me in the Margin. Oh, I'm so excited to read this. I'm really excited to read that. I think this is probably going to be a quicker read for me, so I'm really excited about that. I just have a really great friend who did that, who bought me 12 books to read. So I'm planning to finish this one tonight and then do that one. But I just wanted to do like a little book talk and tell you about the books I read last year and a little book review. I hope that you enjoyed this video and this little sit down. Oh, hello. I never do sit down videos, so let me know if you want to see more sit down videos or more vlogs or cooking videos or anything. Just let me know, and thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next video. Bye.